So Lois, and then who seconded?
Aye.
Casey. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved as it stands. Come to our first public comment. I don't see any hands online. Okay. All right. So we'll move right into old business. So first order of business is restructuring of the school, and we're going to have a FEMA presentation prior to any discussion. And Thad,
That's me.
Thad is here from FEMA. He will be doing the presentation.
Mary's online too.
Okay. I came over there talking to you.
Sure.
Yes.
What is your last name?
Lugmors.
Common spelling?
L-E-U. Common spelling, yes. And pronunciation. L-E-U-G-E-M-O-R-S. And I actually don't work, I work for the state. I'm emergency management. I'm a contractor for the state.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, I was asked to come in, kind of give you guys a ground level briefing on what's going on with the White House project and try to, put it in this in the layman's terms as much as possible. I try not to speak FEMA tongue as much as I can. If I throw out an acronym or something, please stop me and I can back up. But basically, the White House, as we all know it, is hit by a federally declared disaster with a 90-10 federal share. And the federal the FEMA Public Assistance Program will reimburse uninsured municipal losses, right? So it includes emergency works, there's debris, police and fire overtime, but then obviously your permanent categories of permanent repair work, which includes buildings category E. And they will pay you to put it back, after insurance to the way that it was, or to what any new code would trigger if a code was triggered. And then they'll also pay you, they'll give you or allow you up to certain percentages to add additional mitigation onto that, right, at the site. And then on top of that, if you have better ideas, they'll actually allow you to cap those funds and do other things that make more sense or even a better idea. It's called we refer to it as 428 because it's 428, Section 428 of the Stafford Act, which is the Robert C. Stafford Act, who's a senator from Vermont, in case you know that. But he sponsored it, and part of it is all these sections, and so we refer to them as sections. So 428 is the section that allows you to basically what we say cap and carry, right? You're going to cap off the amount of money that you say to FEMA, which we've already done. Hey, FEMA, this is the minimum amount of money we think it would take to safely try to put school children back into the flood zone. But please give us that money. We'd like to do something smarter with it. And the team here has been great working with Cheryl and Todd. We've been working for over a year and a half now. This is one of the first ones, and you guys are the first 428 request we've made. But it takes time to get there. It's not been an easy path. And then, the way that I tell it makes it sound very easy. It's not, because as Cheryl and Todd can tell you, working with FEMA, especially the lower ranks, are really not good at customer service or understanding this. They can tell you what grande means because that's what they were doing the day before. Sorry. But typically you have to get into the upper echelons of FEMA and then start to struggle with them to get these things done. So insides baseball, what's going on with the state, we are working with FEMA leadership to form a team to start to look at, you guys aren't the only capital project we have, to start to sort of churn these out. And right now we're in the process of, we made the submissions, you guys have made the submission, waiting for formal answers from FEMA, which haven't come yet. They've sent us back a few kind of questions, low-level questions, but that's where we are with it now. So at a minimum, FEMA, will reimburse by statute what it would take to give you back your capacity, your facility and function, right? It's not just the facility, it's what the function was. So basically two classrooms with some ancillary square feet in a similar structure, if it's code worthy, outside, and your code won't allow you to put it back in the floodway, but move it slightly and put it there to code, is what basically they at a minimum would owe you in a reimbursement, right? On top of that, then we can add that 406 and we can still do that at that location, right? We can say, okay, we decided we want to keep the building and we want to mitigate it additionally. That is all still, if you stuck to those guns and followed that through all the way, that you end up getting reimbursed for all of your eligible costs. Because the FEMA Public Assistance Program, if it's not a cap project, basically, if you stick with it, stick with the FEMA paperwork, you end up getting reimbursed for all of your eligible costs. Right? What we try to do here with you guys is, get together a nice package to say to FEMA, here's what the eligible cost would be. Please give the school that, funding to consider to do other things with. At this point, they have an answer. We have a deadline of up till October to accept their offer. So, up till July to accept their offer. We got an extension. We haven't heard from yet. But at the end of the day, if they make an offer that the school district does not like, you can say no, and you can just go back to just trying to put it back the way it was. So right now, we're in you're in the final third of the process. How soon it will end, it really depends a lot on FEMA, how quickly they get it grouped together to make these kind of decisions. And again, I've been doing this for a long time. I was here for Irene. I was part of the Waterbury State Office Complex redo, and that was done with the same exact program. Actually, it was a pilot program at the time. It was a post-Sandy pilot program. Is what we used to do the Waterbury State Office Complex. The way we did that was come up with, because that was all state hospital and other building, flood zone, they got flooded. In order to meet code, we designed imaginary flood walls that we knew would never be built in an effort to show FEMA how incredibly expensive it was to try to build that back and put a hospital that should have been condemned in the first place back there. And it was astronomical. And FEMA went from, I think originally when we got here, before they understood flood code, they were saying Waterbury was due about 1.4, and at the end of the day, it was about 38 million they put towards the new complex, which is what you see today, plus the other buildings they built on the site. So that's where you guys are, and what we know and what we always explain to FEMA is they need a decision. They need to know what your trade-in value of the old building would be before they can make decisions to go on onto something bigger or better, or even to start to do what we call stack funding, which is what I'll talk about in a minute, to meet any delta, right? Because we're doing this with the wastewater treatment plants. Ludlow, for example, if we did that whole process that I just described, of telling them, here's what it would take with code and extra mitigation to rebuild it at 15 million, it's 23 million to put a new one up on the hill. So we're working with USDA to stack the additional funding, right? There's other funding sources that can stack on top of it. And so right now, we know you guys have to start to think about decisions on what you're going to do. Our goal is to try to drive that FEMA process forward so that you can start to look at the stacking of funding with the FEMA IRC, the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. Were any of them able to join?
I thought Mary was on.
I saw Mary.
Mary, so
I'm here.
yeah, Mary. So Mary might be able to speak to. I'll defer to Mary on the IRC and the stacking. But that's where we are. My job with the state and working closely with FEMA is to see, get the PA process, over the finish line, or at least close to the finish line, so that they can start to look at that delta. And what we've told people is, generally speaking, if the FEMA 420 offers are where we think they would be, they'll come in close somewhere to the codes and standards plus mitigation number we put forward, which in your case is 1.4 million total. Right? So just to give you, so we came up with and actually we helped the school submit a plan to put forth a bricks and mortar, stick-built modular building, right? We didn't go back with a regular modular because you can't really find them. So anyway, we had them come up with a stick frame plan to match it. And then we designed a temporary or a imaginary berm, to go alongside the school to keep the creek and the floodway away from the school. Very high level, very, for 200,000 or 300,000. Knowing that, probably A&R would never want us to build a berm, and you guys would never do one either. The idea is not that you're going to do a berm, it's to say to FEMA, hey, give us the money that we would put into a berm, do something else with it. Right? So you guys put together a proposal to replace the building very much the way it was, although you got to move it. And then, ask for a berm, which they've given us some questions on. We might have to change it to an imaginary flood wall. We'll see. But anyway, that's where we are with your process. I know that was a lot. And I wish I could give you a better answer on, what the number will be and when you'll get it. But that is, that's a honest appraisal where you are now in the process.
Yeah, that was a lot. So I tried to write, as you're kind of going through, there was a handful of things like you would say, and I kind of, in context, because I didn't know what it meant, I kind of lost what you're saying. So when you're saying mitigate, are you talking about these imaginary walls, like mitigating future damage? Okay. Did I hear you say trade-in value?
Sure. Yeah. So when you're FEMA, and Cheryl can tell you, we've been discussing, we've been working with the FEMA IRC, and I think we'll let Mary talk about the IRC here in a minute. And their question is, how much additional funding, let's say for example, you said, well, we know right now we don't want to do that. We're not going to put the money into that school. We're actually going to close that school. We'll take that money and we'll go improve another school and put the square feet over there for a school that's not close, to the flood zone. Right? And that'll cost us $15 million, right? Well, until you know what the FEMA, dollar value for this 428 project is, you don't really know what the delta is, what that,
What's the delta? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
So we always joke, we say, the joke around FEMA is, well, everyone wants a Ferrari, but until you know what you can trade your car in for,
Got it.
you don't know.
Okay.
So
All right, and then I think I heard you say PA process.
public assistance. So that's back to the FEMA Public Assistance Program, and it's just again, back to the Stafford Act. That's the code name for this program that funds uninsured municipal losses. Once you hit your federal triggers for a disaster, set the rules. And the thing about the Stafford Act is if you're eligible for it and you follow the rules and put your stuff in on time, you get it, right? It's not like, other grants like HUD or something. When, hey, we compete for this and the top 50 are going to get it, everybody else knows. Document the process. You get these costs, which is why they're so very detailed in making sure they're only going to pay for codes and, codes and standards. It's in fact code and standards, right? They're not going to just start throwing away money. They have to prescribe it to what was there before and what was there before plus codes and standards if codes and standards were triggered.
Okay.
And the 428 allows you to kind of push it, say, hey, this is how much we can spend on codes and standards. And this I'll tell you the section 406 mitigation, again, that is additional dollars that you can add to your structure to make it harder beyond what the codes and standards require. A good example is, let's say the flood code would require you to elevate your building, 5 feet. You say, okay, that's what FEMA's going to pay for. All right. Hey, making 8 feet that's a lot. It makes a lot of sense. All right, they're the extra 3 feet, there's no code or standard that's triggering it. But as long as you stay under a certain amount of the total repair cost, there's delta percentages you use to figure it out, they'll pay that too.
Okay. Okay.
So that's what we said in your school. This is the case for the White House, is that the minimum code and standard to put that stick frame building, on the school is this, about $1 million, right? And that it would be code and standard. You don't need the berm, right? Just put it there, it's code and standard. But hey, wouldn't it be nice if we could put this berm into it and protect it, even higher, and the school itself, the very first school. So FEMA doesn't have to pay for that. It's on their part. But generally speaking, if it's a good 406 proposal that makes sense, they'll fund it. And this whole 428 the 428 process allows us to sort of pool those two together and say to FEMA, hey, look, this is what we think it would cost between everything you could give us through the old, through the normal program to stay by the river. Just give us that money to go away from it.
All right, so the 406 also, would that also kind of like be protecting their investment? Like
Yeah, it's all protecting federal dollars, right? Every dollar spent on mitigation, there's studies that say it saves 6 in future damage.
Okay. I think that's all I've heard. I guess, this is definitely not for a living, so I do want to just maybe have it boiled down to what do you guys need, like almost line by line from the board, so we know what information.
I think the reason that is here more for you guys to feel more comfortable so that you can make that decision has to be made on what we're going to do for our project.
Okay, so do we need to discuss the different options with that here?
No, I don't think so, but I think we want to hear
Yeah.
from Mary because that's,
Yeah, but we're gonna, maybe I'll put a kind of I'll tell you why I think I'm here. How about that?
That would be helpful.
Because I've been, been to Montpelier, I've been, there's, before I was a consultant, I actually worked in the state of Massachusetts for MEMA for 4 years, where I came, so I get you guys, you're trying to make decisions and long-term planning and all those kind of things. And generally, you don't see things put in writing or, put before other federal governmental bodies that are sort of like, proposal-ish or half-baked, right? Because hey, we're gonna do this and we're working towards it. What I would say is you give your team a little leeway to, it's kind of sales mode with FEMA right now. We're kind of say, hey, would you buy this or not? And it's sort of high level, it's not real detailed. And if we put things before FEMA, it's not meaning we're not committing the school district to anything, right? You still have to make the decisions. And the other piece of it, I would say, is, just be mindful that this is the way that these disasters go. And the fact that you don't have anything to make a decision on now is normal. You're not the only ones. And just bear with us, don't panic unless you see us panicking. Right? Cheryl got an email last, on Friday. It was kind of, it's not really, and it was like, don't panic. We'll talk about it next week. Right? So that's it on sort of the PA side. Like, and again, I think I'm pretty well in tune with PA to speak for all of us, but I'll let Mary on the FEMA side speak more on the IRC and the stacking and what they do. She's a little.
Hey, you ready?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So I am Mary. I'm with FEMA IRC Interagency Recovery Coordination Division. I am not PA. Although we work closely with them, I can't speak to their rules and regulations, and I wish that I could get you an answer more quickly, but I cannot. It has to come from them. But my role as a federal disaster recovery officer is to coordinate with all the other federal agencies that have resources to bring to bear after a disaster. And we work really closely with PA to identify gaps where an applicant has a project that they want to do, but the PA reimbursement isn't quite going to get them there. So we work with the federal partners to help fill those gaps. So there are multiple other resources that could potentially get you to where you want to be with your project. And we're happy to pull together a resource list for you and also make some connections for you. We actually put you guys on a list with the state of a project that is going to need some additional funding and a look because we were in the process. There was just a disaster supplemental appropriation that came through on December 20th with the continuing resolution, which means there were 20 federal agencies that got a big pot of money that was related to the disasters that happened in 2023 and 24. Particularly, the USDA Community Facilities Program might be a place for us to look for you guys. So there are resources and things that we can help you with, make the right connections, help you with applications, get you where you need to be. But before anybody's going to even talk to you, they're going to need to know what your project is, right? And regardless of the gap, like any one of these programs could, depends, have enough money to fund the entire thing, but you can't match federal dollars to federal dollars. So as we approach this, we have to be careful that whatever we look for in another federal program that you're going to ask for doesn't duplication of benefits what the FEMA Public Assistance Program is going to pay for, right? So it's a process, but we can certainly support the process, help you guys see what resources are available once we know what the project is that you guys want to try to do.
And I just want to add on to that, kind of going off script here too. Most people don't realize that one of the biggest, if not as big as FEMA, funders of post-disasters, right? CDBG, funds, disaster recovery funds, but it's not a guaranteed thing, and they fight over it, and allocations are made by Congress. Well, just last week, the one that we were hoping went through with 62 million attached for Vermont, right? And the way that money works is the state has to do an action plan, and there's a lot of stuff to take yet. And I can't guarantee it would go to these things, but what it specifically pays for is things that other agencies can't pay for, like after Irene, we used CDBG GDR here to buy buyouts that FEMA couldn't fund because of the limitations of their program, right? So there's all these things that are still in play, like it's still coming to meet those deltas. But the way that you get the funding, and are on the list is to be noticed, be vocal, make sure, your other contacts outside of, in-state government and your partners in the town and there's long-term recovery groups. Eric Philform, who is with Pat Moulton and Doug Farnham, say he couldn't make it today, but he was gonna try. Keep it up, once we get traction, keep it in the news, basically, right? And that's a lot of reason I wanted, when Cheryl first mentioned your last meeting, you guys, had, a lot of trepidation. I said, well, it dawned on me that you guys aren't getting sort of the same sort of touch as, like, say, town councils and select boards and those kind of things, right? So we want to make sure we were able to connect with you guys, make you feel like, hey, yes, this is the process, and yes, you're not alone. Don't panic, right? So.
Sad, with your permission, I'll tag on to that just a little bit. Yes, the CDBG-DR came through. For Vermont, it was about 68 million. Actually, the USDA funding is even going to be a little bit more than that for the state of Vermont because they were able to request up to 10%, so up to 36 million for each disaster. Now, they're not going to get 36 million for each. There's 7 active disasters in Vermont right now, but we know that they're going to get a good tranche of money. So between those 2 buckets of funding, we worked with Doug Farnham and Eric Philcorn, and we made a list of all the projects that we knew had gaps and we're going to need some support. And you guys were one of the projects that we gave them on the list, right? As well as several other community-based projects. They're aware. You're on the list, they're tracking with it, they're working with the governor's office as he presents for the budget hearings that are happening next week, looking at what needs to go in the state budget versus what CDBGDR, you might be able to cover versus what USDA can come in and cover. So they're aware, they're looking at you guys, they're ready for the conversations. We just need to know what it is that you guys want to do. And then we can start to go after some of this funding, being careful and cognizant of the fact that we can't match Fed to Fed. But CDBGDR loses its federal identity once it's given to the state. So that one's an easy one if that's what ends up happening.
So if I can try to add a little bit to that, it's the idea that until you make a decision, if a construction project is what you're after in terms of this restructure, it's going to be hard for them to be able to carry us through the remaining steps.
Todd had something to say.
So, Todd, I know you can't speak for FEMA, but I'd like to know what your thoughts are. So for the first part, we struggled, FEMA was limited funding. And now with the underfunded FEMA projects in North Carolina and Kentucky and what's going on in California right now, do you think we'll see any adverse effects in Vermont funding our project for that?
No, because the public assistance program is designed to, if you're eligible based on the program, you get the money, and the Congress by statute, by SAFRA, has to refund the DRF, the disaster relief fund. So no, it's not, like, again, CDBGDR, they might at the end of the year say, hey, we got 300 million to go around. All right, well, this might not be enough, but that's what you're getting. That's not the way the public assistance program works. If you're eligible and follow the process, and don't procure it illegally, you should be okay.
That I can help you with that one too. So the reason that there was limited funding in North Carolina is because the disaster relief fund ran low and Congress did not act quickly enough to replenish it. As part of the disaster supplemental, they replenished it in October. But then in addition to that, as part of the disaster supplemental appropriation that just came through, they added an extra $29 billion to the disaster relief fund to make sure there was enough money for all of these disasters. If you're eligible, you're eligible. It's just a question of the timing. When the relief fund runs low, they don't pay out anything except response and emergency protective measures when the fund is too low. As soon as it gets replenished, then they start paying all of that out. So it's not that you don't get paid, it's just how quickly you get paid.
Yeah, just might get delayed. I've been through shutdowns, freezes, the 10% reduction I think happened when I was in Vermont the last time. So, and it's to Mary's point, no, it might not let them push the button to release the money, but if you're eligible to get stacked up in the queue to get.
Okay. Questions? Anyone online with questions, board-wise? Did you hear that, Scott? Do you have any questions? All right.
Anything, Brandon? You good?
We're good.
We're good.
All right, well, thank you. And I gotta say, your team has been doing an amazing job through this with their regular job also. So, thanks so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
I'm good to drop.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure to be able to be here with all of you. Appreciate you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief, for handling it so.
Yeah, that sounds enormous. Okay, so now that we've had the presentation, I guess I'm gonna yield to you guys to give us direction. Like, are you needing us to decide on just the Chester project right now? Oh, like,
So the decision, the budget hinges on the decision, right? Because there's 3 different options. If you even go that route, right? Remember, these are just the recommendations from the committee that we put together. But if you were to make a decision tonight, that would allow Cheryl to kind of build into the budget, you know, what the loan amount or the bond amount would be. We have an idea potentially of what it could be depending upon which you choose. But that's kind of where we sit. I'm happy to, if people need me to throw up a reminder of what the parts and pieces were. And again, remember that this is a recommendation from a committee. It's not something that the board is compelled to do. Give me just a moment to pull this up.
when you say bond, the bond is what we are expecting to have reimbursement from FEMA.
So that Lane and I had talked about maybe doing a loan instead of a bond, because when we got the FEMA money, we could pay down the loan. If you get a bond, you have it for X amount of years.
Okay.
And we could set it up in escrow and let the bond payment come out of it, you know, if we wanted to. But what we have to do is find out what approval we need to get a loan over a bond.
Does the bond have to be voted on?
Bond would have to be voted on.
Did you, the bond can't be paid back early?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we need to
You have a couple.
look at our options, and then, and I think I'm just thinking this out loud, so
Okay.
please correct me if I'm wrong. We need to kind of think and look at the options in regards to the Chester portion of this project. And then decide whether we would want to pursue it by a bond or a loan. Or is that what you guys are?
I think we can figure that out, because we'll have to look at what the steps would be for a loan
Okay.
as opposed to a bond.
I have a question about loan versus bond. Can I ask it now? Oh, it's gone, okay. As far as you know, will these promises from the federal government to reimburse through the FEMA disaster assistance secure the loan? In other words, if they don't follow through, where are we on the loan?
We'd still have to pay it back.
So at the same time, they're looking for a certain amount of security, and they will recognize this as a commitment. I mean, everything seems very soft, and like it likely will happen. I'm just wondering, if I'm in a bank, you come to me and ask for a loan, which I prefer to a bond, am I going to look at this commitment and say, yeah, this is a real thing?
I don't really, I've never gone after a loan like this for the school district. We do our lines of credit and they give it to us without any problem. It's a tax anticipation note, so they are anticipating the tax. I'd have to investigate it more.
Okay, I'd like to.
So the
Like to
question is
wrangle them on the
basically, is
hook,
it
too.
collateral?
No, it's a secured loan, basically saying, this is our commitment. We expect this, and we're banking on it.
All right, so let's look at that.
Adrian, Lisa's hand is up.
Oh, I'm sorry, can you see it? Lisa?
Thank you. So my understanding that the time pressure on the restructuring decision was that we needed to make the decisions about restructuring before deciding on a budget. And so I guess I'm wondering, just from a few statements, it seemed like we're now potentially separating the preschool at Cavendish from the building at Chester. Are we following the advisory restructuring recommendations in terms of deciding on the whole restructuring recommendations, or are we starting to pull those into different conversations with different timelines?
I think what I'm understanding is we're going to talk about it more as a whole right now. I don't think we're separating things out, but I think that the decision that has to be made today, and again, jump in if I'm wrong, is what we're going to be doing for the Chester portion of it so that you guys can move forward with a number. Am I correct?
And the preschool is already in the budget.
Don't they both have repercussions in terms of budget planning? Those pieces?
So we don't have anything in there for the Chester Andover replacement of the White House. We do have the preschool in the budget.
So it's in every scenario, you'll see.
Right, but essentially you can't move forward with the FEMA paperwork or the budget until we make a decision on what we're doing with the White House. That's what we have to do. Got it.
Okay. Is everybody clear on what we're doing before we move forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So this is actually abbreviated, mostly to provide context for people who may not have had the opportunity to be in the entire conversation. But one of the things that happened earlier this year is the ideas about restructuring and trying to figure out a good recommendation were delegated to the administrative team. And so we spent some time taking a look at all the data that was out there. We collected a little bit more, and then we had some pretty good conversations amongst ourselves and some open forums to get some more information to put into this. And so these are non-binding, but these were the recommendations that the committee came up with, the top ones. So let's see if this is going to work. So the first recommendation that we had was the idea of addressing the overcrowding at Chester Andover. And so we looked at construction, right? And there were three possibilities for that. There were these high quality modulars, which we have some numbers for. There was the idea of a detached brick and mortar building, and then the idea of an addition to the current building. The estimated cost of each is up there. The modular units are a little over $500,000 to put in a brick and mortar building, to add additional space to help with the enrollment overcrowding there. That would be about $1 million. And then to add an addition to the actual physical school building that is currently there, that would be a little over $1.8 million. The general benefits that we saw when we looked at this was the idea that there's no relocation needed, right? Students aren't being switched back and forth between Cavendish and between Chester Andover. There's no changes to bus routes. And then the big one, which is why the FEMA representatives were here, is we're looking at least a 90% reimbursement from FEMA for the majority, if not all, of the project. And in addition to that, their PA folks will work with us to secure additional grants from organizations that are out there to cover the remaining costs. The only problem is, obviously, is we have to have the money up front because it's a reimbursement sort of program. The other piece about this, a benefit that we saw, is that it keeps the students in their familiar locations, right? They've grown to be a part of the culture, to know the adults that are there. And so this would maintain the routines, and this would be a permanent solution. The second recommendation, which is currently in all the budget drafts, there are 4 scenarios that we're going to show tonight to try to help the enrollment problems at Chester Andover, or excuse me, at Cavendish a little bit, was the creation of a preschool program. And that preschool program would serve the entire Green Mountain district. They have the space. Folks have been working with the state. They're already in phase 1, moving into phase 2, analyzing that space to get it up to speed. and to know exactly what we have to do that we can hit the ground running next year. The plan right now is a full week, full day program for 4-year-olds. Say that 10 times fast. And then 10 hours a week or more for 3-year-olds, depending upon what the budget allows. There are program expenses to this, but there's also some savings. To be able to have up to 20 students in that preschool program, we need 1 early education teacher and a paraprofessional. So the total estimated cost is $162,000. There are some one-time expenses that are going to come out of the process that we're going through with the state to make sure that we have all the required parts and pieces in place to properly serve students at this age. The one nice thing about it is that there will be some tuition savings. You know, students that we are potentially sending out to other schools right now and paying for, if they came into this program, you know, it would result in an $82,000 savings. So the total cost of this program is $118,000. To add it, it literally would add 1 penny to people's tax rates to put this in place. And we'll talk about the rates when we get to the budget component. And that's it, unless folks have questions.
Where did they get the 1.4 million estimated cost to replace the White House? Just looking back at the options there.
So that was an estimate that, so the brick and mortar, the middle one there,
Yeah.
is what we had come up with. EEI did for us, and then the additional 300,000.
Yeah, we created a plan for mitigation.
Was that burn?
Okay.
Yeah.
The big reason for the addition, it's all pretty much the same square footage, all 3 of those. Obviously, you're stepping up the modular is what it is. It's not a modular home, but it's a modular classroom. The brick and mortar is, you know, brick and mortar building detached from the school. And the 1.8, the reason that's a little bit higher is because if we add it onto the school, I think it's gonna trigger adding a sprinkler system into the building.
Is that included in the 1.8?
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's it. Total. Well, I'll go first. I prefer the idea of the addition, especially if we're looking at about 90% reimbursement and then the PA program being able to get more. And if they're already estimating 1.4, we are essentially there.
So it'd be 90% of the 1.4. And then the delta would be the difference between that 90% and the 18.
What would that be?
Hang on.
And that's what we go for, you know, with the other organizations to try to fill in the gaps.
And I kind of picked up on, he was mentioning something about some reimbursement that's happening now, and it sounds like it's about a year behind. He was saying that people are receiving funds now for like 2023 disaster issues. So
I know Ludlow hasn't gotten, the town of Ludlow has not gotten. But Chester had the same issue at the end of the year, and it impacts the money they give to us because they don't have.
yeah,
So it'd be 1,260,000. So the difference. About $590,000 difference.
I can't see people's hands. Talk.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just curious if we did go the loan route, which might not be the right idea, but if we did go that way, is that something that would be voted on within the overall budget? Would it not be included within the overall budget, or would it be voted on separately by like everybody, the taxpayers?
We would put the yearly payment into the budget, but the bond itself would have to go to the taxpayers.
Okay.
It'd be the same, what we did previously for the bond that we went out to, and there's a whole process to go through, and it's about 6 weeks of getting notification to the public. You have to do it 3 weeks in a row on the same day, same publication. You have to have a meeting 1 week prior to it, an informational meeting. Not enough time to do that between now
And the loan, you would just have to, what you're anticipating for an annual payment would just be right into the budget.
Yeah, but what I don't know is if we still have to get a public the public taxpayers to vote on that. So that's what I have to find out.
Would you, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. It's hard to hear timing things. Just curious, Cheryl, you don't have a idea of or an estimate of how much that yearly payment would be without going through all the steps?
I do.
Oh, cheers.
So it'd be $167,255 for a 15-year loan at 4%. That's what we're estimating at this time.
I'm sorry. You said
Okay, thank you.
167,255. 15 years, yeah. 15
That's
years,
the low
4%.
amount.
15 years, what, I'm sorry?
4%.
4%.
And that adds about 2 cents to the tax.
Okay, and then I don't know if you can tell whose hand was up first. I see Scott and Lisa. Are you able to tell who's up first?
Can you hear me?
Lisa first.
Lisa was first, Scott, sorry.
Okay, I'm fine either way, but yeah, I would just say that one of the reasons I'm in favor of the modular units is because I know that the full amount isn't recovered if those units needed to be moved to another location. But at least some of it is. The full amount wouldn't be recovered because of the plumbing and whatever foundation kind of thing needs to go in. But there is some recovery. And then just that I disagree with the statement that the 1.4 is almost there to the 1.85. That difference is almost as big as what the modular units would be in and of themselves. And so I am very much for investing in our schools, but I'm feeling like long-term buildings might not be the best place to make that investment right now.
All right, Scott?
One thing is, I might have missed it because I was driving and I pulled over, but is all this in writing from FEMA? This is like a guaranteed we're going to get 90% back if it all comes?
Yes.
Okay. And then my next question is, again, why does it have to be brick and mortar? Why can't it be stick, metal building, something like that? I am in favor more of the not having modular homes because I just feel like they fall apart and they lose value so quick. But I don't understand why we have to do brick and mortar.
I think it's just a mass existing building, so it looks like it's part of the building.
Yeah, my understanding, but we can confirm this, is that a lot of it is to establish what the reimbursement is, but as long as we work with them, we can probably change, as long, right, we stay within those guidelines. It sounded pretty flexible. They're just waiting for us to give them an idea along which path we want to take.
So I got a little clarity on that. So Scott, I mean, brick, they put brick and mortar just so it's not modular. I think that's the best way to put it. It could be timber frame, it could be stick built, it could be concrete block, it could be brick, it could be, Legos. I mean, anything but modular. So that's just the wording that they're using.
Permanent structure, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I get, but I mean, if you're going to call it brick and mortar, how are you coming up with your price? Because everything is so much different in cost.
Right. They put it together as exactly what that price came from, what the existing building already is. That's where they came from. Price. Not saying that that's what we should do, just that's how they came up. That's how the engineers came up with that cost.
I guess my one big concern would be if we're going to go with a stationary building, not a modular, I'd like to know what the exact cost is going to be and numerous options that we could have, whether it be metal, stick, brick and mortar. If it's going to be, how much cheaper would it be if we go? Because I mean, we are asking taxpayers to cover this all up front, and I just don't want to see another nightmare like we're having with the PCV stuff.
But my understanding is if we put in the request for brick and mortar and then do something that's less expensive, that's fine. If they allow us the money, then we can use the money for upgrades and other things. Am I correct in that?
I believe so, the way I understand it.
So we wouldn't be at a disadvantage if we gave them a higher estimate.
But we're going to the town taxpayers to get a bond for a certain amount. I think we should be as reasonable as possible to the taxpayers.
If we're gonna invest in the school, I like the idea of permanent structure. We're gonna ask people to spend the money and spend the money. It makes more sense to me to build it right and build it permanent. I think the whole brick and mortar thing, we're getting stuck on material when we're not talking about literal materials in the proposal, right? We're talking about permanent structure versus modular.
Right.
And then the actual addition, which Todd spoke to, why it's more expensive to tie into an existing structure and system. The brick and mortar piece makes a lot of sense to me. I like the idea of the addition, but that price jump is significant. And if we can achieve the same with that new freestanding structure at almost half the cost, that makes the most sense to me, looking at it.
Agreed.
Would there be some sort of covering for the kids? I just keep getting stuck on like, wasted time, like, oh, it's time for reading, suit up, off you go. And then that's where I keep getting stuck. Would there be something created so the kids can pass through like a breezeway or,
What's the berm money, right?
What?
The berm,
That could be.
the berm we're not gonna build.
What?
Right, so that's basically your pork bellying the proposal, so that berm pork belly could be
So they've said no to the berm, so we have to go back.
We're also
That's what
talking,
the flood wall is.
So a more expensive seawall that builds a nicer breezeway.
this is conceptual anyway. At this point, we're just talking about $1 million for construction. So
Right.
it could
Right.
have a covering, it could not have a covering. It could be steel, it could be bamboo, whatever.
Adrian, you have to talk, thank you.
Tuck? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. During the last meeting, I had asked if Joey could put some thought into if there's a separate structure, whether it's modular or a separate brick and mortar building, could office space or anything else be rearranged to keep the student body all in the main building together? I was just wondering if we got any clarity on that or if there was any thought into that.
Joey is online, but let's let Kate talk and then Joey can respond.
Not to put you on the spot, Joey. No worries.
Oh my goodness. Thanks. I wonder about any concerns we have with the state of education in Vermont at this moment and investing a ton of money into permanent structures at a school that very well could, down the road, we have to make other major changes in our district. That worries me a little bit. The modulars, I think I would rather have a permanent structure at a school. I think it would work better. And I wonder if that is the most responsible move given the state of the state. I mean, it seems as though things are pretty bad. We didn't get any recommendations out of that commission. And so I'm just worried about putting $1 million in front of the taxpayers, and then who knows what's going to happen next year. It could be all of our kids have to go to a completely different place. I don't know what the state's going to decide. Any thoughts on that?
I do.
I say.
In that regard, yeah, there's uncertainty with what the state's going to do with education and this committee and their report. But regardless of what they come out with, they can't build a new centralized school in 5 years if they wanted to. If they could make that decision, it would probably take them 5 to 10 years to actually build anything. Even so, the Chester Andover school being the size that it is, I think there's a low likelihood that they would shut that down on a whim, because then you're displacing the most amount of students that have the biggest impact on education in the area. So that doesn't seem likely to me, and it seems to make more sense to invest in that structure?
I mean, I think to dovetail on that, one of the kind of uncomfortable thoughts is, should the state of Vermont continue in its pathway and we end up seeing smaller schools close, we have to, consider the real possibility that if CTS does end up being closed because of its size, we need to have we need to be in a position to absorb CTS, and Chester may be where they end up going. Just not saying that's what's happening,
No, but I
Just-
agree,
but
if
it's
we're
a
gonna
thought,
need
I
more
agree.
capacity anywhere, that's gonna be at the larger school, that's where the state's gonna do business.
Steve.
Getting back to the Commission on the Future of Education and Governor Scott's recent statements, I don't think there's any appetite at all for a bond. I think if we put this together and feel this as a bond, at 1.8, people are just going to choke on it. I think if we do a loan at $1 million, and it's palatable, and the rest of the expense is basically flat. The thing that I want to come back to is that, I've said this before, the special educators are really poignant in the way that they were talking about not being able to do their job and not being able to educate the kids who need the spaces for their needs. So things like early education and needed enhancements or deficiencies, really addressing deficiencies in special education, those aren't discretionary. We're going to be mandated to do pre-K one way or the other. And we need to improve our outcomes. So again, my focus is what educational programs can we implement with our financial resources that will enable us to have better outcomes, better sped classes, better early education components.
All right, Kate, I see your hand, but I'd like to give Joey a chance to respond to Tuck, if that's okay, and then you can talk.
Hi, this is Joey. Here, I'll turn my video on real quick. So I'm just trying to respond to Tuck, and then I just wanted to say something overall as well. So Tuck's question was, could we put quote unquote offices out in those buildings so that we weren't separating kids? And my answer to that would be that any offices that would be out there would indeed be servicing kids. So that not having kids be out there is not a thing. My other worry about putting offices, so when you think about what are offices and who has an office, that would be a special educator, that would be a speech pathologist, that would be OT services. So you're looking at separating an already marginalized community when you start thinking about putting offices and individual service providers out in a separate building. So that's sort of concerning to me when we think about it that way. I have made it known that I am really more for the addition. I know that you have to be fiscally responsible, and I appreciate that. But my goal is always to do what's best for kids and what's best for our community. And separating our community, I don't believe is what's best for them. Having an attached space is going to be a lot more flexible, a lot more inclusive, and I think will provide us with the best student outcomes. So I hope, Tuck, that I answered your question, and I'm happy to answer any other questions. I'm here for the remainder of the meeting, so if anyone has anything else that they want to gear towards me, I'm happy to field it if I can.
That was perfect. Thank you, Joy. I appreciate it.
Kate?
I can't figure out how to get out of here. So I guess I just wanted to say that I think we've had conversations about, I'm going back to the last conversation, so I'm sorry. We've had conversations about the state possibly coming in and closing small schools, and we've had conversations about the super school concept. And I think that when you look at Zoe Saunders and you look at her history, she's all about the vouchers. And so I don't think that we can just say they won't come in and close a school like Chester, or they won't come in and or they will come in and close a school like Cavendish. They might, but they also might say, you're all going to travel up to 50 miles. I don't know what they'll say. And here's your voucher to go there. I just think we have to think about the big school, the super school isn't the only option that the state might put towards us. So I don't think we have to look at Chester being able to absorb Cavendish, because if Cavendish closes, those kids are probably going to get vouchers to go where is most convenient. I think we have to look at what we can do right now that is fiscally responsible and that the taxpayers will vote for. And I agree with what you said, Steve. I don't think you can put a $million bond in front of people. I just don't think people will vote for that. I don't even know. Would they have to vote for the $1 million loan? That's a vote too? No.
We don't know yet.
We don't know yet.
Don't we get million to hundreds of thousands of loans anyway? I mean, do we have a relationship with a bank where we get loans?
Yeah, but I'll reach out to them tomorrow.
Great.
I think I kind of agree that I think a bond would fall flat. You know, it's just not the financial or political scene for a bond. I think I like the idea of a loan more, only because we would be funding annually with the anticipation of reimbursement within hopefully 1 to 2 years, instead of trying to upfront, you know, such a large price tag, if I'm understanding the process right.
But more flexibility with payback on the loan as well,
Yeah.
which is huge.
I love the idea of getting the federal government on the paper.
Doing what?
We made a commitment to reimburse based on our emergency condition, and here's basically what our guarantee is.
We will get that, but they have to give us an offer first, and we're not there yet.
Okay.
We have to tell them what we want.
Yeah.
It's a constellation of things.
So yes and no. I mean, I think they've got to decide what they're going to give us, and then that 428 project that he was talking about, once they give us what they're going to give us, we're going to tell them this is what we want to do. And that's when we have to have it. But in the meantime, all this money is available. We want to be on people's radar saying this is how much they may be looking.
So it's the 428, and then we would, the 406, that part is the additional amount? Is that, I'm trying to follow the process.
The 428 is the mitigation.
I thought the 428 was the Stafford.
428 is the Stafford, but it's in the police.
Oh my gosh, all right.
Okay. Adrian Scott.
What? Oh, Scott.
I'd just like to point out that I invited a couple of our state reps. I don't know if there's any in the audience there, but there's 2 online. And Tom and Chris, I hope you're listening to this, and I hope you're going to help us with the state issues.
This is Chris. It's been an interesting conversation to listen into and try to get up to speed. If you have specific things that you want me to take to the state entities, please be in touch. You can.
Chris, sorry we had to, it's not public comment yet. There'll be an opportunity for you and Tom if you want to talk during public comment. Sorry. Okay. So any other questions, thoughts, discussions? I want to make sure that everybody's heard and feels comfortable with the vote that, we're going to be talking about.
I would like to ask Todd a question.
Please.
Todd, in looking at modulars, brick and mortar, or an addition, is there one that will be less likely just to disrupt, like pickup, parents coming in, like buses, any, like?
Depends on which way you guys decide to go, right? I heard somebody say something about a breezeway. If you put something detached from the school, and you talk about a breezeway, because you will have to walk outdoors to get, students will have to walk outside to get to that. Put a breezeway, then you're gonna cut off the whole loop around the backside of the school. Right? You'll be able to go in one way, but you won't be able to go all the way around the building if you put a breezeway. The addition that they're talking about adding on is on the playground side of the building. So we'd add on to that end of the building. We'd have to reconfigure the driveway a little bit right there and probably cut into a little bit of the playground. I mean, we haven't got that far deep into it with the architects and the engineers, so that's their plan as of now, not our plan, but that's what they put together.
I was just curious, knowing the already difficult pickup situations and drop-off situations, how much of an impact that would make.
And you don't have to put Reed Lake, and you don't have to, but students and teachers are gonna walk outside, you know, to get to that building.
Okay. All right, do we want to make a decision on this and then move into budget, or do you want to talk budget and make a decision? I mean, we have to do both tonight, but would you guys want to talk about the budget and then make the decision? Would that make people feel more informed, or do you guys have an idea of kind of where we want things to go right now?
I kind of thought we needed to make a decision on this before we could really get into the budget, because this is going to impact it. Yes, Lane. Sorry.
Make sure I get this right. So if it were to go to bond or loan, the additional cost in terms of tax rates for the first two would be about a penny. For the large one would be about 2 pennies. And that's to cover the payments each year. So just to put it in perspective.
So what happens if we get that, when we get that money back for FEMA, does that go back to the taxpayers?
So you could make a decision. You could, if it was a loan, you could pay off the loan. And then the remainder of the money could be voted to go into your reserve fund. You could vote it to go into your reserve fund when it comes back, so that you have emergency money in case a boiler blows up or some of the other work that needs to be done on some of the schools that's there. You know, if something catastrophic happens, you've got that rainy day piece. So it would be pretty wide open.
They would cover other expenses that would reduce the budget maybe in the future.
Possibly.
I mean, more and more, I like the idea of a loan.
Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, the towns aren't also carrying a bond, like you said, that can't be paid off early, so. I think the loan sounds more responsible on a lot of different levels. Okay. But we are not voting on whether it's a bond or a loan. We're voting on which option right now. And then you're gonna look and see if a loan is available.
That's what I'm sending you right now.
Okay. And should it not be available, I guess we'll come, I mean, there's potential that we would have to come back and talk again. Is that? All right. So does someone want to make a proposal on an option? Which option we're going to move forward on? I see Kate's hand. Or and then we can go into discussion. Sorry. Kate.
I wasn't going to make a motion, but I wonder if we, I can't figure out where you are. I'm sorry. I don't know if there's any value in taking a straw poll to see where folks are at and having discussion, because we might be between two options. We might be between all three options. We might be narrowed down to one. Or just somebody making a motion about one of them is fine by me. I'm just curious. I feel like we're all over the place. I feel like some of us are for the addition and some for the brick and mortar and some for the modulars. And I just wonder if we're going to get to a place of decision.
I'm happy to poll. I'm sorry, Casey.
I'll make a motion if that'll move things forward. So I would move that we request the amount estimated for a brick and mortar structure at Chester Andover.
So the brick and mortar versus the addition.
Yes.
So that was how much?
Slightly over
$1,050,000.
All right, is there any discussion on that motion?
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
Oh, sorry, Ben. Is there a second for that motion? I don't think we have a second for that motion. Okay, why don't we do the straw poll? So we're at. Okay, so with the straw poll, I guess we just kind of go down the list, and see what people are thinking. Do you, just, to simplify it, we can, option 1, 2, and 3, everyone clear on that? Can you just put the options back up, please?
I don't want to make it life harder than it's difficult. But as we're talking about trying to shape the budget, and we're talking about adding these things that have $500,000, million, 1.8. I don't think we're trying to get these budgets. We're putting these budgets in front of the public and saying, we're going to spend $2 million on a building, when in fact, we can run this loan thing, we can get it reimbursed for it, and it doesn't have to be reflected in the budget. So I don't know how to structure that, but putting together a budget where we're anticipating a loan is different than saying, okay, we're going to have to fund this somehow.
I'm not sure if is there a question there? I'm just not sure. I appreciate the statement, but
I don't think if we're going to get a loan, we can put it in the budget.
Yeah.
Just the yearly payment.
The annual payment for it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
What you're saying, Lane, is the annual payment would add a penny or two per,
Depending what you choose.
is that per ballot?
Penny per $100 of assessed value. So $10 per 100,000. Assessed value. With the statutes.
I mean, I think I understand your point, Steve, which was why I was more, I guess, leaning towards a loan. Is
Right.
It's less of a burden to the taxpayers, and we have the potential to pay it
And as we're
back.
putting together the budget, I wanted to reflect it. We're actually thinking about the loan and not a 30-year bond.
Yes. I think. So I think doing the straw poll, I think this will give us a direction on which option we want to then vote on, which we are hoping to get a loan for, whichever option we end up voting on.
Scott's hand is up.
Sorry?
Scott's hand.
I was just going to suggest we do it as a 2-part, whether we do a loan or a bond, and then do we do the addition or brick and mortar or modular?
Well, we can't vote on whether it's a bond or a loan because there isn't necessarily a guarantee that we can get a loan, and I don't think that's an
And I
option.
think that's, you've got to wait to see what FEMA's going to offer us to know what we really are going to need, and then
As a loan.
Yes, and I think then, I think what Scott said, we have to get some additional estimates and consideration. I don't think that you're ready at that point with a dollar amount that you need. So we'll figure out the logistics building up to it, and then at some point in a later date, we'll have to decide on what that might look like.
So what we're deciding on today is going to be which option with a price tag,
So
so we can try to build a budget around that.
So the money's there. Worst case scenario is you don't make a decision. If we build in, what would you say it was 67 or 167? If we build in that extra 167, that would be surplus at the end of the year. Could go into reserve fund.
All right, is everybody kind of clear on this? So we're going to straw poll option. And then we can move forward with which vote, whether it's a bond or a loan is not at this point something we're going to be able to vote or discuss. Okay. All right. Actually, do you mind, because I can't keep track of what's going on online here.
That's no problem. So what I'm looking for is what, 1, 2, or 3, is that?
1, 2, or 3 as it's there. So modular is 1, brick and mortar is 2, addition is 3. Is everyone clear on that? Everyone online clear on that?
They're all the same square footage.
Supposed to be.
Supposed to be. I don't know if you heard that.
And then the brick and mortar, isn't that supposed to be attached to the building? So wouldn't that be an addition?
The addition.
The addition would be attached.
The brick and mortar is just located near the building.
Okay.
So everybody's clear on what 1, 2, and 3 is. So now we're going to go around and ask what each person is leaning towards. Okay.
Steve?
Module.
So 1, Casey?
2.
Katie?
3.
Lois?
3.
Jeff?
3.
Scott?
3.
Lisa?
1.
Kate?
1.
Todd,
3.
Adrian, did you want to?
I do, 3. Okay, so we have 6 threes, correct?
Yes, I have 6 threes, 1, 2, and 3 ones.
Okay. All right, so with that, we're leaning towards the additions. So would someone be willing to make a motion in regards to the addition?
Again, if you want.
What, Scott?
I'd like to make a motion that we go for the addition, but the price that's in front of us isn't the exact number that we're going to look for options on that addition.
I'm not sure if that helps with building your, does that work for your budget, like building?
We're gonna base it off of that number, but it's not necessarily gonna end with that.
That's gonna have to go for bid.
Okay. All right, so Scott, can you just say that motion again then, please?
I'd like to make a motion that we go for the addition, contingent on, I guess I don't even know how I'm going to word it. On that, the number that we're being shown, the 18 or the 1,800,000 might not be the exact number, but we're going to go for less or try to get options.
Estimated cost.
So that's, you're setting a maximum, Scott?
I'm not setting a maximum.
Can I read back to you what I have?
Yes, please.
You can tell. Scott, I'm going to read back to you what I have, and you can tell me if I've captured you accurately.
Go for it.
Mr. Kendall moved to pursue the addition option contingent on understanding that the $1.85 million may not be the final number.
Correct. I like how you said it.
I know what you're doing, Amber.
I'll second.
So seconded by Lois. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, do we not have an opportunity to discuss the motion after it's made?
Okay, we can discuss it more.
Thank you. Should I go ahead or are there other people?
You.
Okay, yeah, so just in thinking back to the conversations that we're having about budgets, where we're talking about things like, can we support the mental health facilities and personnel, or even increase those at the high school? When in some cases we are in desperate need of improving teacher compensation in multiple ways to retain those teachers and get the benefit of their experience. And when we have literally 30-minute long discussions about a particular bus and should we sell it or keep it over the 5,000 or 2,500, and when we're even last year thinking about taking away sums of smaller than that from our principals to be able to do things that would be direct student support. I'm just really feeling like the amount of money to likely effect on student performance is way out of balance here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate that. I came in a hard option oneer. I thought it just made sense to go with modular units that had more flexibility down the line. But I think really after hearing what Joey was saying, for me, if we're going to be trying to solve this problem, it makes sense to listen to the person that's at the center of it and really kind of take her advice and support what she feels is right, because she's in that school every day and I'm not. And that was kind of all I needed to convince myself that was the right move for the kids. And that's just kind of where I'm coming from.
I agree with Chuck.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion about the motion that's been made? Okay. So is everyone clear on the motion, or does it need to be read again?
No.
Okay. So all in favor of the motion on the floor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
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 So we'll do roll call?
Do you want to do that?
Yes, please.
Casey,
Yes.
Steve,
No.
Katie,
Yes.
Lois,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Lisa,
No.
Kate,
No.
Chuck.
Yes.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yes.
Adrian, you casting vote?
Yes, I will vote yes.
Seven in favor, 3 opposed.
So the motion passes. Okay, all right. So the next order of business is discussing the 26 budget.
Adrian, Kate.
I'm sorry. So,
Kate.
oh, I can't see, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm out of line here, but in my head, I just said, hey, we did it. This was a long time coming to make a decision. And I think that's, for what it's worth, we did it.
Lisa's hand is also.
Lisa?
Thanks. And yes, congratulations. In my understanding, we were also discussing the CTES preschool before we were moving on to the budget, because that would also have an effect on the budget and is part of the restructuring conversation.
I believe it's already been moved into the budget, Lisa.
So the last time we saw it, it was in the flexible, not necessary part. And so if we were voting on restructuring, and this was part, and the preschool is part of that, why would we not vote on that? And then it would be moving that money to the necessary, the other column. Or are we going to have that conversation as we're talking about the budget? And then I guess I would ask why.
You could make a motion ensuring that the preschool is in any budget that the board votes on. That way, it's, if the concern is making sure that the preschool is there, that way it's guaranteed. I believe we built it into every of the 4 scenarios that the board had asked us to research.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that if it's just a given. I didn't know that the preschool was definitely going to happen.
I mean, I think at the last meeting, everybody was pretty much on board with the preschool moving forward, understanding that it would provide about 20 students should they come to CTES. Is that everybody's understanding? Yes.
Yeah.
If you'd like to make a motion, Lisa, happy to entertain it.
Sure. I move that we start a preschool for at least 20 children as described in the upcoming year.
I'll second.
So Lisa has made the motion for a preschool to be developed at CTES. Tuck has seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Do you need a dollar amount or no?
It's already built in.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess it's built into the budget. I guess I'm a little confused by. And I'm leery of building any sort of mandatory, this is gonna be in the budget no matter what, for anything, doesn't matter what we're talking about. I don't know, that to me is not too necessary.
Well, nothing's mandatory because we may have to come back and change everything. I said, nothing's mandatory because we may have to come back and change everything if the budget doesn't pass.
So is the vote is going to be about, if I'm understanding it correctly, the vote is going to be that the board supports putting a preschool into CTES? Is that everybody's understanding?
Anne Marie.
This is what I wrote. Tell me if I'm changing. Dr. Sanders moved to begin a preschool for up to 20 children as described in the restructuring plan.
Is that acceptable to everyone? Yes. Kate, get your hand up.
I did, but then I took it down because I think we circled back to a result.
Okay. All right. Is there any other further discussion? The motion on the floor?
Am I understanding that that means we are doing a preschool regardless of like having to come back and look at the budget again? That's what it sounds to me.
In the budget.
is that- Right, but if we have to look at the budget again and say that we need to take something out, am I understanding correctly that a preschool is going to be in the budget no matter what?
Everything's always on the table.
Okay. As long as.
At this
As
point,
long
that
as we
motion
can-
puts it into the budget, but I don't think it's,
All right.
It's not saying so.
All right. So is everybody clear on all that? Everybody heard it all? Yes?
I think so.
Okay, all right. All in favor of the motion on the floor, unless you need it read back?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion passes. All right, so now we will move into fiscal year 26 budget.
So actually, if we can take a break for 5 to 10 minutes, we'll update all our numbers, make sure that everything's exactly right.
Okay,
Based upon our.
is the board okay with taking a break? That's great. All right, we'll recess for 5 minutes. Recess.
Discretionary use that. 5:37?
I know too, because like I said, I talked about it.
So what?
I thought. No, we're going with it. I'll let her know that meeting. Yeah, I would have absolutely not. That's just.
No, I'm.
Coaches.
No, thank you. There's also no
Right, and then I should see.
Yeah. No, everything else. Oh, right.
I was comfortable with going to, because I thought I had an idea.
Yeah.
That was where.
Is there a second?
Figure it out.
Materials as long as you put it for the fire marshal. They said that like we need our engineers and so architect. I just ran timber frame deals, absolutely.
Depends how much caffeine I've had. If I've had too much, I get jittery, so I'm likely to make a mistake. Like the coffee maker in the office.
The other thing is.
This will have to add another 2 cents. Because of
The other thing is keep them all. Back in January.
yeah, so they'll vote on it next week at the regular meeting.
Yeah.
And, beginning of the school year. That's something they already gave them. Yeah, before that. High school.
Yep.
Those of us that are there. Got a friend. Remember our first day coming down.
The kitchen sink budget, everything in the kitchen sink. The other thing we need is system
Okay, we're gonna come back to order in about 1 minute.
It's probably, I probably hit this by accident.
Okay, we're gonna resume now. Finally.
All right, I do want to thank folks for allowing us to kind of double check to make sure we've got everything the way the board expects. So what we were asked to do at the last session was to kind of take a look at some different budget scenarios. And so I'm going to show you the tax implications from all the hard work that Cheryl's done over the last couple of days of what the potential tax implications would be for what we're calling our current draft budget. That was the one that was presented in December, and I'll review what's in that and what's not. We also have what's called the federal reduction impact on grants, the FRIG budget, which I like that word, given this piece. That's the impact on the budget and the amount of money we may have to replace if the bill that is sitting in the House and the federal government goes through in terms of the reductions to the grants that we receive. A level service budget is just that. We take out all discretionary spending. We are adding to last year's budget in a level service budget, but just enough to keep all our services and staff and programs the same as they were this year. And then the last one was what we call the excellence budget. That is the one that's got everything in it that would be required to really get things moving at the high school. The other schools are actually in pretty good shape in terms of the work that they're doing.
So just so I'm clear, level 3 is level service, not level funding.
Yeah, level funded means the same dollar amount. Level service means everything goes up, but the services stay the same.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's,
These don't include the payment for the loan. That was
Right.
just-
and we'll bring that in at the end. Yeah. 10 and 20, 10 and 20. So discretionary expenses, like we talked about at the previous meeting, are expenses, are things that we're adding to the budget that we could live without. You know, usually they're in there because they're going to help us better in terms of the students that we're serving. but we could live without them. And so there's about $324,539 in discretionary spending in this first budget. And most of it is for staff. A little bit of it is for like curriculum resources for the programs that we have. There's a lot of expendables that need to be replaced on a yearly basis. We're looking also at an additional bus driver in addition to the teaching staff. And that's because of the concerns that folks have had about busing and having it be consistent, people to be able to depend upon it. And so this would allow us to have a substitute bus driver every day in case somebody calls out sick. 0.5 custodial at Chester Andover, just given the number of students that are there right now. A replacement for the driver's education vehicle. We were looking for $5,000 for a trailer for the mountain biking club, which is growing and expanding by leaps and bounds. $7,000 for a kiln for the art program at Green Mountain Union, and $2,000 for Ruler, which is the elementary social emotional kind of learning platform that we're using currently. So questions on this?
Well, I just have a question about the expense of replacing expendables. That has to be in the budget.
Yeah, yeah. And these aren't unreasonable numbers. We were looking at in my other district, which was about the same size as here. I think the expendables for ELA were probably about 25,000, and for math, we're about 35,000 a year. So when you bring in those programs, there is an ongoing cost that goes with them. I've highlighted the wellness up top. Because I believe we kept that in every version of the budget because the board voted to keep that at last meeting. Mandatory expenses are those things which we don't have control over. It typically goes along with increases in utilities, but the biggest component of it is the guarantees that we have made through our contracts with the staff in the schools, right? The teachers' contracts is step raises, and we negotiate incremental raises as well. Same thing with the support staff. And so in terms of mandatory increases, and this also includes the preschool, 1.2 million. So a little over 300,000 for the discretionary, 1.2 million for the mandatory. So the total change in expenses on that December budget, it was looking at a 1.5, almost $1.6 million increase over the previous year. Now, before we go into what that means in terms of people's tax rates, it's probably important to remind people of how Vermont does things. The tax rate is how much you pay for each $100 of value of your property. It's really related to the grand list, but we can relate it to your properties because it makes more sense. So for example, last year, Baltimore's tax rate was $1.28. So that means for every $100 of property value you have, you are paying $1.28 in taxes. Right? So if my property is worth $200, I'm paying twice that amount, $256. If your property were worth $1,000 at this tax rate, right, you'd pay $12.80 in taxes because 1,000 has 10 sets of 100 in it. So 10 times $1.28. And if your property were worth $100,000, and this is the more meaningful number, you'd pay $12.80 in taxes for every $100,000 of value of your property. So under the December scenario, we've got the current draft that's here. And so we've got different towns, and so their tax rates are all a little bit different. In Andover, last year, it was $1.78 was a tax rate. Under the December budget proposal, it would be $1.96. What does that mean? That means that for every $100,000 of property value, taxpayers would be paying an additional $181. Baltimore, right? Baltimore stays the same because they reassessed, so they'd be looking at $4 additional for every $100,000 increase, or every $100,000 in property value. Cavendish would go from $172 to $198, so they'd be looking at $264 per $100,000 of property value. In Chester, would be looking at $266 per every $100,000 of property value.
These tax rates do include the CLA, so this is the.
Yeah, so a lot of we'll separate that out once the budget's decided upon eventually, because the CLA has a huge impact compared to what the school was actually doing.
So you're saying an additional 181.
From what you paid this
What you-
current
Okay,
year.
I just want to confirm that. And then just for clarity, I just went back and checked the minutes. The board didn't vote to keep in the wellness. I think we wanted some information. We wanted some
Okay.
data points. Just for clarity, I'm not suggesting anything, just we didn't vote to keep it.
No, that's good. My memory is, as I get older, it gets worse and worse. I gotta start taking my Geritol, I guess. So the other situation scenario that we looked at was the idea of what would the impact be on that December budget if we had to compensate for the bill that might pass the House and the reduction that it would cause in the federal grants that we receive. So in terms of last year's consolidated federal program money, so this is Title I, Title II, and Title IV for us, we usually get about $706,000. We would see a reduction of $259,000. So we'd have to make that up in the budget if we wanted to keep services the same. And so you can see what that would do, where you see reduced federal, right? You know, Andover, it'd be an additional 2 cents over the previous scenario that we looked at, with a moderate change, about a $20 change in terms of people's taxes per 100,000. Rule of thumb for this particular scenario of budgets that we're looking for is that for every penny that changes in the tax rate, that's $97,000 in money collected. Or for every time you want to reduce the tax rate by a penny, you have to reduce what we're asking for by 97,000. So I just round it to 100, make it easy. That makes sense. In terms of level service, that number is a little bit different. It's actually the discretionary is the 324. We would remove that discretionary things that we're asking for, and the impact on the budget where you see level service, it would bring things down a little bit, right? So you're seeing about a 6 cent drop in Andover, and you can go across the bottom and look. Baltimore would actually save a little bit of money because of the reassessment. They'd be paying $33 less per 100,000 of assessed value. And then the excellence budget, which all it adds, based upon the December budget, would be an additional 0.5 person for mathematics, right? Right now, in the previous budget, we have 1.5 people added for mathematics, the 1.0, specifically to be a math teacher to make sure that we were able to offer all the math courses every year. The second body, whether it's a 0.5 or ends up being a full 1.0, would be for coaching. We've got math programs and that are going on. We've got work that the teachers are doing, things that they're agreeing to do in the classroom with the students, and the coaches are able to go in and model those behaviors. They are able to go in and provide feedback to the teachers that are trying to use that best practice in the classroom. So the excellence scenario is the bottom line. And so one of the things that I would take away from this grid is the idea that even though there's some dramatic shifts, you know, in one case it was, you know, $300,000, $400,000, you're only seeing a few pennies difference. Our taxes, and this goes back to the discussions that we had earlier this year, they are really not in local control. Right? We pay for everybody's education across the state, and all the taxpayers help us pay for ours. And so whenever we make a cut, a lot of the savings is going to the other taxpayers in the state. You know, we're going to benefit a little from it, but nowhere near as much as we think we're going to. The converse is also true. If we're adding to our budget, right, the majority of the state is paying for it, and we're paying for a little part of it. Where things get messy, like we're seeing right now, and this is the holdover from last year's legislation, is they basically redistributed the money between the schools, right? Same amount of money. The weighting system took money from some schools, added it to others. These schools were already functioning. They really didn't need the extra money to function, but they got the extra money. If these schools were functioning under a certain dollar amount, they now lost a few million. They have to make up for it in terms of raising their taxes, and we all paid for it. And so it's going to take about 5 years for the districts to adjust to that magnitude of a change. And so we're going to be seeing messy budgets probably for at least 3-4 more years, the way things are going. But a lot of this increase that you're seeing here, this is not due to us. The other districts had to estimate, you know, what they would be asking for this year. That went into the state, and that goes into the formulas that we use to calculate this. So a lot of that increase is not due to what we're doing. A lot of stuff quick, and I'm a little tired, so I apologize. Questions on any parts and pieces here? The current draft was what we looked at in December. The reduced federal means we're just taking out what we might lose in federal monies when the new administration takes over at the federal level. Level service means we're getting rid of all the discretionary spending. We're just increasing the budget enough to make sure that we maintain what we're doing in this current year into next year. And then the excellence budget, the only thing it really adds is another 0.5 over the current draft in terms of the math teacher. The other piece for the excellence budget, which really doesn't impact Green Mountain, it would impact TRSU, is we really do need an assistant director for special education. If we have those two people there, we would be able to go after some of the service delivery things that are happening. We'd be able to go after how outplacements are occurring and be able to hopefully cut back and get our numbers down to the state or the national average. We're at 30%. We should be around 14 or 15. Actually, it's 15.7 now. It's gone up since COVID nationally.
Wayne, Kate's hand is up.
Yep. Kate. Ooh, you're
I'm
muted.
sorry, I cannot get myself off mute on this device. I'm sorry. So I really want to use that word that you used, but I can't because it feels like a swear word. But in the reduced federal budget, is that based on our current year or the current draft or excellence? Like, what would we get? I realize it's more money because of the reduced federal funding.
So what these monies help us do, so Title I money, that's used for direct services to students. So if we have students that are struggling, having problem in math, or they're having problem in ELA, this is where we can have a student tutor or a student coach come in and help them kind of get up to speed. It might assist with after school programming at some point in time, or summer programming. Anything that we can do to help students that are struggling get up to speed with their peers. Title II funding has to do with providing support to educators, to teachers. And so a lot of professional development that we would be doing with the teachers that would hopefully improve teaching and learning within the district is born under Title II. And then the Title IV typically it's a smaller amount. It's for outreach. It can be for STEM. It's got a whole mixture of things that the state allows us to use that. But if we lost that money, that $259,000, and we wanted to maintain those services, we would have to build an additional $259,000 into the budget to cover it.
Right. And so that would be an additional $259,000 on the current draft budget?
You got it.
Okay, not the excellence budget or this year's budget. It's that current draft.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I actually, because that would be shared with Ludlow Mount Holly, so I only did 2/3 of it into your budget because it's generally a 2/3, 1/3 split. So it's about $173,000.
Yeah, I'm looking at it at the TRSU level. So, yeah. Good
Wait,
question.
this is the TRSU level?
No, the two.
What's those numbers up
That's the
there?
TRSU level, okay.
Yeah.
So the level service is assuming that we don't lose that money, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm having a hard time mathing this. The reduced federal and the excellence for Baltimore is the same rate, but it's different.
Yeah, so adding that, in other words, for the excellence, you're adding a half a teacher.
No, I understand, but like, why is so 129 for the reduced federal is $16 for Baltimore, and then under excellent it's 129 and
If you
it's
can
7.
drag it out, it's actually like 128.
Oh yeah, they go out a couple more decimal points than you're seeing.
And it doubles the. Doubles it. You see what I mean? Am I?
No, so make sure I'm looking at the right one.
I see what you're saying.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm,
Yeah.
So this one?
nope, so the one above it, 129,
Yeah, reduce federal.
16.
Yeah.
Go to the bottom. Bottom. Yep, 129,
Mhm.
7.
Hmm.
Can't make that math.
So when you take it out, it's 2129 1. The other one's 2, so it's almost a 900 of a.
But it doubles the rate.
I know.
I'm pretty sure the math, but I can check it. Yeah, those, like when I have up there, $1.28, there's other digits beyond that.
Okay.
And so that's why, you see like, if you look at Baltimore, you see that $4 increase, even though it was $1.28 the year before, and it's $1.28 again because of the extra digits.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a good question, but I'll double check it to be sure. It's a good point.
Questions, thoughts, discussion? Hands up. Digesting it all?
I'm still just stuck on the state education funding formula and the lack of ability we have to actually influence. It's beyond frustrating.
It was a very good attempt to do the right thing, but the impact was not what was expected. Which is why, we've got to, if we're interested in trying to help solve the problem, we got to get the state on board and understanding that the only way this works to get taxes to go down is everybody has to make cuts, right? And then what's the best way to do that without negatively impacting students? Because we all depend on each other. Good thoughts. So the construction loan, we kind of talked a little bit about this when Cheryl was taking a look, so I get to blame you for this one. If you're looking at the modular or the stick house option, that would add about a penny to the tax rate in terms of, the cost of the loan over the 15 years and 4%. That means another $10 per 100,000 of assessed value. Brick and mortar is about the same. It's about a penny. And then the big one would add 2 cents or about another $20 per 100,000 of assessed value.
Only until the loan is paid.
Till the loan is paid, or we get reimbursed and board says, okay, let's use that money to pay it off quick. The other decision that the board is going to have to make on the next meeting, I believe is on the 16th, is your surplus and your reserve funds. So at the end of the previous budget cycle, you had about 1.2 million left over in the budget, which is called surplus. After July 1st, you are stuck kind of confirming the amount and then deciding what to do with it. Folks decided to roll $500,000 into the current budget in which we exist to help lower taxes for folks. One of the reasons that your taxes are high is because this was the cost. I like how Kelly talks about it. You gave people a coupon for $500,000, so you reduced the cost. This year, you don't have the coupon. So you had to build another $500,000 into your budget because you took it out of surplus or one-time money last year, I should say. That means you've got $773,000 that is remaining in there right now, and you got to decide what to do with it. You could roll it over to subsidize next year's budget to again bring people's taxes down. You could vote to put it in the facilities reserve fund to help cover part of the potential construction project that we have, which means the loan would be smaller and therefore the payments would be smaller. Or you could do a combination of the two. Or you could put it in the facilities reserve fund, leave it there until we need it for something that falls apart.
Continuing to roll it into the budget to try to reduce costs and everything is where we hit that cliff of we've subsidized ourselves to the point of
eventually if that money stops coming in and your surpluses, you hit a cliff because you gotta make up for it. You don't have a coupon anymore.
Right. I know the tax rate just
It catches up to you.
Yeah, so it basically is kicking the problem a year down the road.
Making it bigger, potentially.
Potentially, yeah.
So when you say facilities reserve fund, is that different than the capital? Like, so if
So
like
we
we
would
start
make
putting
it different.
boilers below?
We would make it different because of legislation that it talks about the reserve money, and if the taxpayers put it in, state can't touch it. If we put it in our budget,
They might be.
they might.
So if we put it into the capital, they can pull it? Is that
It's not the word of how it gets there. So we put it in through our budget,
Which is on, so it's
Which
state,
is
it's
voted
secured from
on,
the state being.
but it's
able to
not the
rate it.
same as an article where the taxpayers will bet.
So
whatever we have to do to protect it from the state.
Then we want the taxpayers to vote on it.
So it would be another, yeah, it would be an article on the warning.
Okay.
It would say, we want the taxpayers to allocate, so many dollars of the surplus to go into a facilities reserve fund, which means that it can only be used for facilities. And the board would have to vote to release the fund.
If we go down that road and that goes onto the ballot as a, rider, can we put on there, to secure it from the state so the taxpayers know? Because if you just hand a taxpayer saying, the school board wants to put, $750,000 in reserve fund, they'll probably look at it and go, no. But if you say the school board wants to do this to keep the state from pilfering it from us,
I don't think you could use those words.
somebody who works
I
at the little
think
better.
legally, the word is
next
quite
to it.
specific of what you have to use. That information has to come when we do the informational meetings.
And so we talk about it. I generally, like I said, as we get really close to the vote, I usually do like a 3-part or a 4-part series of little articles I send out. One of them talks about, the financial landscape. One of them talks about the budget, what we're trying to do with it. And then the very last one explains surplus and reserves, what it means. And then it goes into, okay, this is what it means if you vote yes on the budget. This is what it means if you vote yes on this article. So people can actually print that out, take it with them if they forget what they're voting on. And what potentially is going to happen.
I guess the key is to get people to come to the informational meetings so they understand what they're voting.
Right, I'm starting to just game plan as we roll into budget season again, and how do we communicate this to people in a meaningful way, so, they understand what they're voting on.
Yeah, Wendell Mount Holly is going through it too. And then they had a bunch of different pathways for us to get the messaging out, which we're trying to see if it's effective. It's really good ideas the other night. Well, I think that's it. Let's see if we can do a slide out. That's.
Anybody have any questions? Anyone online? Questions, board wise? Steve?
Are you getting accurate data from the Office of Education? Are you sure these are like the final numbers?
They can't possibly be the final numbers because it's all estimates. Matter of fact,
How black are they?
they don't get final numbers until after the vote. Until after all the vote on March, whatever it is this year, March 3rd.
Are they supplying any data now? Okay, and that's accurate, what we're.
At the given moment, yes.
How close is it matched in previous years? That's probably a good, better question.
I think as far as the long-term weighted, it should settle down. I
It's
still
just
don't,
was so surprising last year.
yeah, that was the yield that kept changing, and right now they haven't changed the yield.
Okay.
And I don't know what way they'll go with that. One of the pieces of information I don't have yet is what the preschool grant's gonna be. So we're basing that on last year, but that's part of the TRSU budget, and so that's settled, so we'll just have to go with that.
So, it's always a moving target.
Yeah, you're voting on a best estimate.
Yeah, okay.
But even today, I got a new long-term weighted ADM. River Valley Tech voted on their
We just voted on our
tuition.
budget. And we had to raise tuition because, and the, those centers are underfunded from the state, and they're looking to change the way they fund so that they don't have to charge their sending schools so that the state would be helping them to maintain their programs, but that hasn't happened.
That's another thing that was.
So I'll pull those all together so that we have the most accurate numbers when I bring the budget back to you on Thursday, but they're only as good as the moment.
Right.
And remember last year, what happened is they changed the law, they realized the loopholes that people were exploiting, and then they changed the law after most districts in the state had already voted on their budgets. Yeah, it can happen, depends what the legislature is up to, now that they're moving.
So one of the things that we do have to put on the ballot language this year is we put in the cost per pupil and the percentage increase over the previous year. So last year, they actually had a legislative session and nixed that part of the, but it is in this year. So with the current scenario, it's 17.86% increase of cost per pupil last year.
Cost per pupil? I wasn't looking at that earlier.
Right line, 14,568.96.
My understanding is that that's probably cheap compared to the average.
The average 15.
568. Well, so the threshold, 50,000. So if you go below, above that, so we are not. You just put the drop in. You're at 10,061 last year. Dropping students and the increase in the budget, you know. All be a little bit different on Thursday. But we do need to know what scenario you want to move forward with first to bring back.
To bring back for a vote on Thursday.
Yeah.
The scenarios back up, please. We have to absolutely pick one tonight. I mean, we kind of have the numbers. I almost feel like.
So the numbers are going to change a little bit. I have to add, you know, the long, long-term rate changed a little bit. I'll change a few things.
And you could do something completely different. What's up there? Ask us to do another scenario.
Adrian, I do have some numbers. We weren't sure if it was tonight or today, but kind of overview numbers.
How does the board feel about that, sir? Or do you want to?
Two numbers about.
Well, I think that the last meeting, they asked like how many visits and we have some more complicated data. I mean, I can.
For the wellness center.
For the wellness
Yes.
center.
Okay.
Yeah, for the wellness. I could try, join the meeting, I could put it up there, but it's pretty easy to numbers. And as I go through it, you can just. We had this year from September, it was late September, until January of 25, at 374 number of times the wellness center was accessed this year. Of that 374, of those 374 students, 24 of those were students in 9 through 12. And that was 86% of people. We didn't open the middle school part, and I'll show you, I can talk about it a little bit later because there's so many other roles that we have in the guidance office. So we were able to work with students as they needed and as we have in the past, but they weren't able to access the room because we couldn't guarantee that there was someone there for the students. So we certainly serve students because we're right across the hall, but not in the same capacity of this. Of that, so the main part that we part open first, and that was for high school, was lunch. We had 82% of that 370 of the 324 students from high school used that space for lunch. If any of you remember, I mean, lunch is a very popular time. We have now since opened the middle school as well, because that's the time that can be more stressful for students in a cafeteria setting. 18% of the 9 through 12 came at other class times. So if we're able to staff, we would then bring them over and go through our process there. For the middle school, of the balance of numbers, 90% came out of class or other. And again, that's because we didn't have the people to staff at school lunch. And 10% we were able to staff on a case by case. We have since opened it since we've been back, and finding that our numbers are going to be pretty similar, we expect, as the high school. Students, they're 42% of the students, so 42% of 374 students, 42% access the wellness more than once. We truly believe that in order to do the academic work and engagement in school, we have to assess their mental health. That's why, as I said before, we have an additional 1.5 clinician who just comes and uses our space. It's private, but it allows parents who can't transport their kids, and it provides equal access. So equity is very important in this work. We have doctor from Sojourns comes once a month and is able to meet. We have about 12 slots. Again, it's just a place that we give them. It's off the nurse's office. We have been able to reach students who, for one reason or another, are not able to access medical care the way that they would like, or that's sometimes possible. We have a dental hygienist who's come in, and again, using space off by the nurse's office, so that flow, it makes it very, I mean, we don't want the stigma, as we don't want stigma on mental health, we don't on regular health, and this specific program and all the research that we've done, we believe that will help. And we've seen some changes. We also can bring teachers in to, as we, refer to, help and talk to the students on their level, particularly as we move to middle school, because a middle school dirty look from a friend can set off the whole time, and how do we re-engage those students? I think, and my team, as I speak, Jess, our clinician would be here. She's out sick. Really, truly believe that we are in a position that if we want to turn things, this is a piece of it that we need. And if you get down to dollars and you say, well, I only have this much, I would want to come back to the table and say, well, what if? That's the budget process I worked through at Green Mountain. We used to have these meetings all the time like it. So I appreciate it's different. And so I appreciate that. But to have that time to say, if you really believe this, Pam, I mean, I've been here 18 years. I think very rarely am I here asking for something of this, and really believe that this will make a difference in our community and our students. And if it's not something that before, I mean, I thought we've had support last week. I'm hoping it's still there, but if we do not, I would want an opportunity to come back and have that.
Is the medical care that students are accessing with parental?
Oh yeah, everything is. Yeah, it is actually Sojourn. So Sojourn sends us all of their stuff. We don't have any access. All we do is say, who do we know? And then we have the paperwork for all of them. But yeah, we don't have anything to do with any of that stuff. They're on the computers, yeah. Okay.
Adrian Kate, hands up.
Kate, sorry.
I just wanted to say that I was in a meeting the other day with a bunch of people in the world of mental health, and they were talking about how to get into schools and do better with mental health and well-being of students. And folks started describing the best practices and essentially described this model and this program. And I got to say, hey, our school does that. And in that moment was able to use it as a selling point for why Green Mountain is, exceptional in this area. So certainly you have my support.
Thank you.
The line item funding this, does that include the medical care and other services?
We don't pay for
provided,
that.
Just, okay,
Yeah,
so,
this is for the programming that would happen in the wellness space. The other piece of it that's, is if we had a person there, we would be able to reach out, as you've heard in years past, in a lot of elementary homeschool liaison, right? That comes in and works with families who has no power, you know, principal or guidance counselor, system principal, there's this imbalance of power. And so this is just, how can I help you? And there's no judgment, there's anything, how do we do that? And when we get into attendance and getting kids engaged in class, that's an avenue that this person would be able to oversee and to go in.
So the 84,000 doesn't fund the space because we have it.
Oh yeah, we already have the space. So Jess's grant, so we have the space, it's for those who are here, it's the old music room, I think, our old, Jess Kessler's, her Roland grant was for $100,000. And we were able to work so that she didn't leave us. For lots of times the schools, you have a sabbatical, then they hire somebody, so half of that money is paid off just covering staff. We were able to work things out that when she could come in and not do that. So we were able to fund and research a great deal on that piece. And then we were along the way and asking those very specific questions. Like, and there's some schools in Vermont that do it, in some Massachusetts, say, okay, what do you do when? And we are actually ahead of the curve because we don't need, we wrote a grant, Brittany Marrow's our SAP, she wrote a grant, so we don't have to hit the technology for an iPad to be able to use the Apple TV that's in there for groups or things like that. So a lot of the things that we already have are part of the school, so it's not any additional money other than a staff member who would still, would still be part of the guidance department and facilitating that piece. I don't know, I think John, I don't know, John, Cheryl, with the amount, just the amount
Pretty well, the amount there as well covers like a full family health insurance too, so you have to put everything in there to allow for the worst and hopefully get the best, if you like, the cost wise. But if we get somebody who come in who didn't take healthcare for any reason, that number could come down by 30 grand, or that would be money enough to use for other things. So.
I just wanted to piggyback on Adrian's question about the medical care and services and stuff. Is all done with consent from the parents?
Yep. So what went out is an email to families saying that we would have, say, sojourns would be here once a month. If you are interested in either having your child see them, here are the required documents, put them in an envelope, they give them to us. Jess connects with our clinician, and it doesn't go through our school secretary. I mean, the level of, because we're talking about the HIPAA, not just purple, really HIPAA, is all goes through that. And all we do is say, okay, we know that these people, or in some cases we have reached out because we hear that you can't, there's not a bus, you can't get from Chester to Springfield if there's something, or students who are waiting because they're sick on Friday and there are no, and except the emergency room, there aren't any urgent care places that are there if parents, need to do it. So it really, but we are so over, and not only are we, but they are, because it's their license, it's their spot. They came out and checked the space. It wasn't something that we did, quickly. They made sure the space, the confidentiality and all that stuff. With the clinician piece, we had in the past, had an outside clinician come in and use our space. It was Deb Harrison, and all it is they do their own thing. She's not, unless there's something that she feels we need to know, she is just using that office space because we have it available, and she does her thing in her billing. They work out of Chrissy Webster's office, and they do it that way. And our piece would only be like any other student that if we felt we could make a referral, but we make referrals for kids to clinicians all the time. This, we just know that it can happen pretty quickly. We're pretty, I don't know, I think we have a pretty well-oiled machine when we're dealing with kids in crisis, and And also doing all that, because we've done all this, but really working on the balance with our just kids who are applying to college. I mean, that's not like they're all applying to college and getting in. We just had a student get into early decision at Columbia, right? Like, I mean, and now they're talking about scholarships and things like that. So it's that balance that allows focus to really be on the long term and that continuation of care, whatever that would look like. Yeah, this is what we got.
So I think if there's any more questions for Pam or you think of something afterward, you can just get in touch with you. This
Oh, absolutely.
prior to that.
Yeah, and I probably can do something, Kate can probably do something with it. She's at the bathroom right now.
All right, but you guys will come back for Thursday.
Oh, yeah, we'll be here. Yeah.
Any other discussion from anyone? Do you want to put those budgets back up? So what are people thinking in regards to which budget we want to pursue?
I like the excellence budget. For the incremental difference, it seems like a lot in it.
Anyone else? Thoughts?
I just accidentally pushed record to the host. You can ignore that. My apologies.
Talk and then Lisa have the hands up.
Talk.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, clarify, we're just voting on kind of our starting point for Thursday's meeting. There's still going to be time to make adjustments then, right?
Yes. And this is just to give you a direction for Thursday.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'd say start big then, personally. It just makes sense to me. Why not have it all on the table?
Lisa?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to ask. How would we be for the excellence budget plus the reduced federal possibility?
I'd probably add 2 cents. So
Yeah, but just because they aren't both in one right now, that would be my preference as a starting point.
Yeah, rough rule of thumb is $100,000 per penny change. So what was let's go back and see what that was, and we can figure out it's about a penny change. Yeah, because yours at 170, so that's the TR sheet. Yes.
Talk, did you want to talk again?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just say as the starting point for a conversation, I don't see any reason not to have it all on the table.
Anyone else have any thoughts or just? Is there something, Melissa?
No, I'm confused about the difference between the reduced federal and the excellence budget. If we combine the reduced federal with the excellence budget, how much would it add? Do you know what I'm saying? Like
a penny.
Just.
So it'd be 270 or 284?
So for which town?
Or any, I mean, like any.
So Andover would go from $1.97 tax rate to $1.98.
It doesn't make sense to me because in Chester, you've got 284 is the reduced federal and 271 is the excellence budget. And if all you're going to add is another penny to combine it with the reduced federal, it makes no sense to me.
It has to do with the decimals.
Okay.
Multiplied by decimal places multiplied by 100,000 makes a big difference.
I'll have to trust you, but this is not my field of expertise.
Well, maybe we can do a couple more places out.
So should the federal government not slash budgets, but we built it in, then what? Because I would want to.
That money would end up being surplus. again, so you have a potential strategy here of, you have some critical systems that need to be fixed in the building. Like the boilers, and Todd can probably speak on what's most critical. But the boiler here is a big thing, and it does not hurt to be putting money into those surplus accounts if people are willing to do it and they understand. Because you're going to have some costs. We also don't know what's going to happen with the state.
Right.
There may be some costs associated with that.
Kate's hands up.
Kate? Thank you.
Do we have any sense of time on the federal decision on that?
It's funding for the coming year. This budget that we are looking at is my understanding. What they did is they usually fund it, I think, in November around Thanksgiving time. The Senate passed the funding, the House did not, and has its own kind of proposed bill that includes these cuts. And so they're waiting for the new administration to come in to start doing the votes on it.
Would you think that'd be like in the first 100 days, sort of?
I don't know. Depends if they shut the government down or, right? They got to be in agreement on stuff to be able to get it passed. It depends how long they argue about it.
So if we added the reduced federal to whichever line item we should, like we end up going with, there would be that built-in cushion, but then we would also be talking about that additional article on the vote. I just want to make sure we're like, kind of not like, and maybe I'm not thinking about it right, we wouldn't be double dipping, right? Like there might be this extra if the federal government doesn't do this, but there's also this other line item that we would want people voting on. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. So the reserve vote that you're thinking about, that's dealing with money from last year's budget. That's the problem with the budget season. You've got to think across 3 years.
Okay.
This would be surplus for going into reserve, 2 years from now?
So we already have it. It's just where we put it. And then the other additional. Okay.
Yeah.
And we still have to add the, so those rates up there still have 2 more cents to be added for
The 1.8 million for the work.
I mean, I guess I kind of agree with the logic. I mean, like, I don't necessarily know if that's what I would want to vote for in the end, but I guess I understand the logic of like starting at the ideal, and then if we have to parse it, like parse away.
So I think I could come up with like what I have here.
And just change it on the fly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's got a really awesome spreadsheet.
Okay. Does that work for everybody?
And the difference between the current draft and the excellence is that halftime math position.
That's it.
That's it.
Yep. Yeah, and you can see with the level service, so that's cutting the little bit of discretionary there is. If you cut more than that, so this is, to get you to think about potentially next week, if you decide you're going to cut, cutting more than the discretionary means you're getting into what we would call essential services.
Yep.
You're going to lose programs and staff.
Impact on tax rates is going to be negligible.
Yeah, you can see by the changes that are up.
Right, and that's what I'm just, again, looking ahead at what we can do to be responsible to the students and the taxpayers, and trying to strike that balance. Again, we have kind of a negligible impact.
So, if you wanted to cut, if you hand over, so if you wanted to cut, that's almost a 20-cent increase. That's an 18-cent increase, the current draft over last year. If you wanted to cut that 18 cents, you'd have to take 1.8 million out of your budget. Right. So that's about 18 teachers, if you're looking at it in terms of staff.
Anybody? No? So where are we, what direction are we asking the administration to take?
Do we need to vote or?
Well, we just need to give them direction for the next meeting. Do we want them to work up the full budget with the reduced federal involved? Do we want them to just do the excellence? Are we looking at level service with federal? I mean, like, we just have to give them direction.
So I agree with Lisa, the excellence with the reduced federal included.
Anyone else?
So the other question would be about the reserve. We have to come back to that with,
Yeah, it's gotta be on the warning too, that you're gonna vote on. So what do you wanna do with that 772,000?
Facilities.
I would agree.
We just have so many critical systems like on the brink. I think we would be foolish to.
Right, the boilers, potentially in addition, that's,
Yeah,
that makes the most sense to me.
that helps maybe us not going back to the voters for a bond, you know, like.
Yep.
Well,
so,
that, and that could also be used towards
the construction.
construction.
Could you also, I mean, I don't know if this is too much to ask. If it is, I can hear that. But, what if, back to the other budgets, could you also do, level service plus the reduced federal? So we could look at that number. Is that too much to ask? Like having,
say that again. Well,
so we're doing like excellent with reserved federal
yeah,
combined. So like the best case scenario.
yeah.
Then, you know, could we also look at level service with reduced federal, just so we have that number?
Or would you rather current draft with? reduced
Yeah, I mean, you
rather
know,
than
like,
level
maybe
service?
something, you know, like, if we can't get the Cadillac, like, can we like look at a Honda, or whatever?
So
And
that's
not get that
Right.
So I don't know what to say. Like, you know what I'm saying, like, you know, finding, like, I just,
So I think that would be current draft. rather than-
well, yeah, I'm just saying, like, you know, best case, and then, you know, like, yeah. Or even just average case.
Okay.
Does that, I don't want to ask too much, but I just feel like if we don't have something to compare it to, we might be spending a lot of time going in circles at the next meeting.
Okay.
I mean, the difference is very small because it's just that.
Okay, does that work for everybody?
Yes.
All right, is there anything else that we're not going to do the warnings? We'll do those at the next meeting. So that brings us to public comments. Unless there's any more. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump out of that, but are you guys good? Okay, so public comments. Anybody? Andy? Okay, we'll do them after Randy.
Good evening, Randy Miles, Chester. I was just wondering if it would be possible in the future maybe to allow public comment before any vote takes place, because there's a lot of information on nights like tonight that come out. And the public really doesn't have a say until afterwards, and it's already too late. So if that's something that maybe can be kept in mind, would be great. The one thing listening tonight that I've heard is lots of increases in other programs. And I've heard actually very little with what is going back into the immediate hardcore courses, the actual classrooms themselves, to move the students and teachers for better grades. Well, it's nice to have all these other programs, but we are really getting this budget up there and things just keep going up, and we're not really focusing on getting the education really to get better for these kids. So that'll come out through the voters. Regardless of what you decide to vote on for that, we'll have the final say on that. But this is what I heard tonight. It's a lot of other things. It's nice to have another bus driver on hand, but that's more money, and it really comes out of taking the money out of the classroom for those kids learning. So that's my input on for tonight. Thank you.
Just for Randy, we do have a public comment. There was one earlier.
There was one earlier, but all the information came out, with the FEMA. I mean, that was great. We all don't know what's going to happen with the state and what they're going to do, but it's almost a no-brainer. If we're allowed to keep all our schools, it's a no-brainer. It's a great thing for little money from the taxpayer to have an addition like that put on.
No, I'm just talking about where were you wanting a public comment?
Like before votes, like you voted on all three of those options, and the public really didn't have a say because we didn't hear FEMA first. We heard FEMA, after. All that really, wasn't known. So some point before you decide to vote on these things, when information comes out like this. Otherwise, it's kind of a little bit useless for the public comment to really take place.
Can talk about that. I don't, but the board can talk about that. I'm not entirely sure we can put public comments into old business, so it's got to be kind of before or after. But I guess we can go back as.
They get shifted around through different meetings. Sometimes they go much later, sometimes they come earlier and stuff. And not every meeting will be the same, but sometimes there will be special guests that will bring information to the board and to the public. And to take the public comment out at that point until the very end, when everything's already decided, is kind of a moot point.
Okay, all right, we'll look into that.
Thank you.
All right. Any, Chester Telegraph? And so I think it went down.
Okay.
Okay. Everybody muted. They're muted?
They come off mute and then put the mute back on.
And the hands down.
The hands down. Might have been a mistake. They might have hit the button.
All right, is there any other public comment?
Yep, I don't know how to put my hand up digitally. Sorry. Going back to the question that was posed by Scott, earlier when we were talking about your addition, I'd certainly be willing to help in any way I can at the state level, bringing ideas or recommendations forward to the committees. Of course, the work up here has just started. The legislative crystal ball is not nearly clear, and we haven't heard specific recommendations from the governor's office yet. I know that the state funding formula is one of the high items on the list to be reconsidered for exactly the reasons that you were citing earlier, that one community can make a lot of cuts to their budgets and still not get much reduced in their tax rate, and other schools can benefit from our cuts when they're not making them. So that is an inequity that is being looked at very, very hard. I don't know what is likely to follow it. With regard to the likelihood of a school being closed or merged with a project such as you're mentioning, either recently completed or underway, I would say two things. One, there's not a lot of appetite at this point for closing schools unless it is utterly necessary. Particularly grade schools, the conversations are more attentive towards high schools, with the thought that younger kids really should be closer to home, closer to where their parents are geographically. If it does come to a voucher system, or it does come to schools being combined, I don't know that it is unwise to be the school of choice, and to have the program in place and the facilities in place to make Chester Andover or this district appealing as the magnet school. Other than that, I'm willing to help. But like I said, it's going to be another couple of weeks before we hear budget recommendations and specific recommendations. But I'd be happy to talk about it down the road. And also, thank you for your hard work. Your job is harder than mine.
Thank you, and I would appreciate if you continue to come to our meetings. Thank you. Any other public comment? So our next meeting date is January 16th, 6 p.m. here and on Zoom. If there's nothing else, motion to adjourn from anyone? Katie? And Steve. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, meeting's adjourned at 8:29. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.